call the meeting to order. We'll be led in prayer by Chaplain Harry Comprud and follow that with the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's pray.
Lord, I pray for the leaders of Russellville, thanking them for their service to the community. I pray for your guidance and direction in the discussion and the business at hand, and that the decisions made here tonight are done in the best interest of the community. Let unity and respect for one another always prevail. I ask for your hand of protection upon our men and women serving in our fire departments and police departments. Be with each family serving our militaries around the world. And I pray for the mayor as he is tasked with providing leadership to the community. I ask each and everything in our name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. You have a copy of the minutes in your packet. If everybody has had a chance to review that.
Motion to approve.
Got a motion?
Move to approve, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we got a motion from Mr. Wiley, a second from Mr. Eaton.
No.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. McCoy?
Mayor and Council, finance report for March 31st. General fund revenues were $870,349, 1.35% above our projections. Sales tax receipts were $674,587. Franchise fees and permits were $49,276. General fund expenditures were $959,345, 1.83% below our projections. Year to date, we've had $104,095 more receipted than expended. Street revenues, operations is $131,102, 15% below our projections. Sales tax receipts, $40,221. New half-cent sales tax was $41,448. Street fund expenditures were $133,009, 12% below year-to-date projections. Sales tax improvements was $0. Capital expense was $70,156. Economic development revenues were $20,719, $15,404 was the new sales tax, $5,315 was interest. We had no expenditures. Capital assets revenues were $551,729, $536,630 is the new sales tax, $10,847 from an airport grant, $4,251 in interest. Expenditures are $96,975. That went to City Corp, Administration, Community Development, Animal Control, Airport, and Parks and Rec.
Council have any questions for Mr. McCoy? Mr. Nose, did you want to speak on that, on the finance report, or on the finance report?
Aquatic Center, I think.
Okay, on the, I see what you're for the finance committee. Okay. Thank you, Mr. McCoy.
Thank you.
Next item of business is a commission appointment. Board of Commissioners of the Russellville Housing Authority unanimously approved to reappoint Mr. Chase Smith to a 5-year term.
Motion.
Motion, Mr. Wiley.
Second.
We have a second from Mr. Roberts. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. For the mayor's report, we have a presentation from Mr. Nathan Rutledge with Cruz and Associates. An award that the city won actually was presented earlier this year at Municipal League.
I got it this far. I'm trying not to break it before I give it to you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Nathan Rutledge. I'm with Cruz and Associates, which is the investment bank of First Security Bank out of Searcy, and we're excited to be here tonight. The opportunity that we have is to present the city with a 2014 Quality of Life City of Distinction Award for cities of greater than 20,000. For those of you that don't know much about it, Arkansas Business started this idea a few years ago, and with the hopes of rewarding cities around Arkansas for the good things that you're doing, bringing attention to it, and then also giving everybody else the opportunity to read a little bit and learn about what you're doing, and hopefully they can replicate it somewhere else. It's been really fun to be a part of it. Our connection to it is we work with Arkansas Business as a sponsor, and that's really fun for us because we do a lot of the bond financing that finance a lot of the projects in here. So we have fun delivering these. Our role in that is kind of developed. As you know, the council, the Arkansas Business, along with us, present it in January at the Winter Municipal League. But then we have the privilege of getting to come to each council and make sure that everybody gets to receive an award in front of their own citizens. So thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. If you'll flip over to the inside cover page of the booklets I sent to you, you'll notice that there's 6 categories: workforce development, Main Street preservation, quality of life, green energy conservation initiatives, tourism development, and technology advancements. So there's plenty of opportunities for each city to find something that they have a strength in, and to step up and to show others around the state what they've done. And if you'll notice, Arkansas Business has done a great job with these write-ups. They do this insert every year for the past, I think this is the 4th year. Over on page 20 is the write-up for Russellville. So you'll notice the title reads, Loop, Street Enhancements Benefit Travelers. And just looking through this and knowing, just being a little bit part of the process and knowing what Russellville's been doing the past few years, I love giving you the award because I know what you've been doing, and I know that the progress has been something that's been steady, and it's kind of just here the past few years gotten to where a lot of this main project, the Complete Streets project, has really kind of taken effect. And it's just fun to see cities in Arkansas. To pass a 1-cent sales tax is not necessarily the easiest thing. Some communities have an easier job doing it than others. But to get the citizens involved, pass a 1-cent sales tax, to see a process go from 2008 all the way to 14, and then to have something like this come around and actually reward the city for the good job that you've done. And then I know that I think you've re-voted that tax to go into the future, which I think says a lot about the leadership within the city, because that's one thing that we see around the state, and I guess everywhere with small governments. If you give them a little bit and they can trust you with it, then they'll be excited in the future. The citizens will say, hey, we'll keep reinvesting with you. Y'all keep reinvesting in the community. And I think that's what you're doing, and it's pretty exciting to see. So hopefully as the years keep moving and that tax is still there, and the citizens in Russellville are excited to watch y'all, and y'all listen to them and see what other projects you can do. But for this one, we're excited to present the City of Russellville with its City of Distinction Award for 2014 for the Complete Streets program, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rutledge.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a comment in regard to this and thank Cruz and Associates very much for all that they do to make this kind of thing happen, and it is a positive thing. And I thank you, Mr. Rutledge, for coming here and making this presentation this evening. But in order for something like this to happen, in order for the city of Russellville to receive an award like this, somebody has to make the effort to put our name in the hat, so to speak, for what goes on and what has gone on in order to even be considered. And some of you may know it and some of you may not, but Ms. Tracy Klein Pugh is the individual that did the legwork and the heavy lifting and making this happen for the city. Whether we had been selected or not, the work was done. But it's the icing on the cake when we do receive the award. So I would ask for her to stand up and get some recognition for that effort tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton. I'll keep my part of the mayor's report short because I think you're all going to want to hear what Mr. Jones is going to deliver in a minute. We have gotten a few things done since we were together last. Fire Station 3, we have the mobile housing unit is in place. We've got a signed contract with the remediation company. They should start work on that early next week, unless you know if you've heard anything different, Chief. Monday. Very good. Moving ahead on that, while we're talking about Ms. Klein Pugh, she has worked the last 2 or 3 weeks developing an emergency action plan for City Hall. I think she's done a great job. She got some input from Richard Sedian and from others, but we handed that out today, and we're going to try to get all the city employees, City Hall employees trained on it. We have that for most of our facilities. Somehow just thought about doing it here, but there's several items in it that we need to prepare for. This week we visited with a representative from a group called River Valley Food for Kids. I was hoping they could come tonight and speak about it. We'll try to get them on for May, but May 1st we're going to do a proclamation for them. That program, if you're not familiar with it, it kind of caught me by surprise. I believe her number was 28% of children in the Russellville School District are, the term they used was food insecure. Doesn't necessarily mean they're always hungry, but there's always a question mark hanging over their heads about where their next meal would come from. This group primarily deals with children who are on the free and reduced lunch programs at school, and their concern is for the summer. Some of these kids, the only dependable meal they get is during school. And so they started this last year. It was mostly faith-based. They managed to raise $36,000, I believe. This year they think they need 50 plus. And so the city's going to do as much as we can to promote that and see what we can do. But it's an interesting program. Hopefully everybody we'll send out some information, and hopefully everybody will embrace helping with that. Most of you know, March 26th, we had some severe storms down around the City Mall area. Some of the damage was pretty severe the next morning. We had a lot of employees that pitched in and tried to mitigate that as much as they can. I heard stories about that night. Members of RPD and Russellville Fire went above and beyond. The next day, Brian Holstein went above and beyond. He went 3 or 4 times a day to check with contractors, remodelers, insurance people, anybody that needed it. So I want to recognize our employees. We've got a lot of people that work for us that are constantly going above and beyond to the point that we kind of get desensitized to it. But I think we ought to recognize all of them for an extremely valuable job that they did to help those people. I mean, it's one thing to talk about damage to a building, but inside those buildings were jobs, and it was pretty scary that first morning, and now it's almost forgotten about. Everybody's, as far as I know, is back to work and moving on, but I want to thank the employees for what they did, especially the part that they did that was above and beyond what they really were required to do. That's going to be all my notes, because I'd like for Kurt to come up and tell you about this pamphlet he just laid on your desk. I think it's an opportunity that we should consider.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I've got a couple of gentlemen back here with me from our GIS department, Duke Trimble and Ben Gray. Ben's actually our floodplain coordinator for the city, and Ben is actually the one that kind of brought this to my attention and got the ball rolling on this program. It's what I've set on your desk, and I'm going to keep this pretty short, but it's the National Flood Insurance Program's Community Rating System. There are approximately, well, not approximately, I think there's 18 communities in the state that currently participate in this. Russellville is not currently one of those, but that's what I want to talk to you all about. The bottom line is this is free to the community, and it saves, it saves people money on their flood insurance rates. If you turn the page there, that table 1, it shows you the rate classification, and then what the savings would be on the actual flood insurance. The discount that the property owners that have property within the special flood hazard areas would have. For example, we think that we could probably, just doing what we're doing right now without a whole lot of changes, could get a rate class of 7, which would save property owners 15% on their flood insurance. To me, that's a no-brainer. There's as you thumb through this, there are some there's items in here that kind of tell what we would need to do and what the kind of the point structure is to try to get that. But if you go back to that table 1, for example, for a class 7 rating, we would have to have 1,500 points, and we feel like just in some of Ben's communications with the state floodplain coordinator, that we could easily get that class 7. Worst case, maybe class 8. We're still talking about 10%. Again, this is not any cost to the city to participate in this. It's just a willingness to administer and protect the floodplain and monitor floodplain development in a manner that we're really already doing. There's some other things that we could do to increase our rating on down the line, but I don't want to really get into that this evening. But as we get into this program and look for additional opportunities to increase our rating, we would certainly do that as well. It is the process is it's not an immediate process. It would, it starts with a letter from the mayor expressing a desire to be in this program, and then they work with us to go through and kind of analyze what we're doing, and at the end of the process, give us a rating, a score. And at that point, our rating goes into effect, and people would start seeing some savings on their flood insurance rates. So, but other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about it at this time, or if you, after reading through some of this and doing some research on your own, if you have questions, feel free to call me. I'd like to, at some point here in the near future, get the ball rolling on this program.
Yeah, I'd like to see you go ahead and move forward with this.
Okay.
Bring it back to the council and let us vote on it.
Okay.
Looks good to me, Mr. Jones.
I think it's like I say, I think it's a great program. I think it's something that would benefit. We're already doing what's required of this program.
What is our rating now?
Well, we don't have a rating. We're not a participant in it, but we estimate that our rating would probably be a class 7, just based on what we're doing right now.
Based right now, you think we would be a 7?
I think it would be a 7. Worst case, maybe 8. But even with an 8, and I don't think, even if we're at 8 right now, I don't think it would take too much to get up to 7 without any. There's some things in here that we could do that would push us way up, but we may not be ready to tackle those right now. But I think we're somewhere around a 7 or an 8, and that's just doing what we're doing right now, and people could immediately start seeing a 10% discount on their flood insurance rates. Okay.
Can we have something formal for next month?
Absolutely. I think, I'm not sure what would actually, I mean, all we need is a letter from you, Mayor, to FEMA in this program expressing a willingness, and that would start the ball rolling. I don't know if if a resolution is necessary for you to send that letter, or, that would be, I guess that would be the next step, would be for this council to actually pass a resolution expressing a desire to be in this. That they don't require the resolution. All they require is a letter from the mayor.
Mayor, do you need this council to give you the authority to do that?
I think so.
If you
I'd
do,
rather
I'll make
do it
that
way.
motion.
Do we need a resolution, Mr. Smith, or can we just do it by motion?
Make a motion, we approve this.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll get that done right away.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Our department report this month is Mr. David Harris, our city planner.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to take a few minutes tonight and talk about the very much needed update of the comprehensive plan. Excuse me. If you were here in February, you might remember that the mayor's State of the City remarks, the portion about the planning department, that was our one thing that we really wanted to emphasize, that the comp plan is seriously geriatric and needs some attention. I've talked to several of you folks since that night, and I've also talked to several of the planning commissioners and some of my colleagues on staff. And because I didn't want to just jump in and write this thing all on my own, the RFP for the work. I want to get some notion about what other people thought. And what's become more and more evident is there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the comprehensive plan is. There are quite a few folks who are sort of conflating the zoning code and the land subdivision code with the comprehensive plan. So I'd like to take a couple of minutes tonight to kind of clarify that. And I don't mean to embarrass anybody. If you don't work in the real estate business or haven't worked in our business in planning and zoning, why would you know about this stuff? So, and if you already know all of this stuff, please, I'm sorry to bore you. But the plan is not a law. It's not a code, not a regulation. It's a statement of policy. It's what we developed through this big process. It will involve as many folks in the community as we can possibly drag into a series of meetings to figure out, what is it that they want for the future, an expression of what the community, by that I mean the citizens, what do they want the town to be? And what comes from that, even though it is not a law, when we write the zoning code and the land, especially the zoning code, but to some extent the land subdivision regulations as well, they're based on what we say we want in the comprehensive plan. So it's a statement of policy. It helps us very much, and we're making the planning commission or you folks, when you're making decisions about zoning or capital improvements, it's very much helpful in that decision-making process. It's, hopefully if we do a good job of this update, we have everything kind of in one box. So when you get ready to look at this project or that project, you're not so much looking at them in isolation and hoping that you're remembering everything you should be thinking about. You've already, because of this process, you've already put them in the box together. So it's very much a good decision-making tool. But right now, ours was done about 15 years ago with a very minor update about 10 years ago. The information and the data, land use data, demographic information, all that stuff that's in that plan was done in 1998. So it's a 15-year-old plan based on 17-year-old information. We really need to update it. So that's kind of the explanatory. If anybody would like more clarification, I very much encourage you to stop by and talk to me or phone me or email me, whatever. I could go on and on about what those things are and what they do. The unpleasant part of my presentation is it's not going to be cheap. I've spent quite a bit of time looking at plans and updates that have been done in other cities over the last, I guess I went back about to 2010. I've probably looked at about 50. And I threw out the outliers on either end as far as cost. And I did a really crude analysis, just basically cost and population. Now, there are all sorts of other factors, like whether you want a bare bones kind of economy model plan or you want all the bells and whistles. But I thought just for at least a crude comparison, I would just do it by cost per thousand. And it runs from anywhere from about $250 per person to, there was actually one that was $25 per person. That was insane, I thought. But anyway, I think we can fall in the middle there somewhere. But we're talking just a very, very, very rough, but I hope ballpark estimate I don't see any way we do this for less than 60 or 70, and it could be closer to 100 easily if we get a very thorough job. But I can't emphasize enough that we need to do it. Sooner or later, we're going to have a zoning decision or something like that that somebody challenges and takes us to court, and we're going to say, well, we base that on our comprehensive plan. And then they look at our nice 2001, based on 1998 information plan, and they say, well, you're basing it on something that really doesn't have, much to base it on. So just hope that you'll think about this. I'll try really hard. What I thought I might do is do sort of a two-tiered RFP, kind of one that asks for everything, and then one that was sort of a stripped-down model. I don't think there's an issue with doing it that way. I've done it in another state. I don't know if anybody's in Arkansas, but I don't know if there's any kind of regulatory thing that says we can't do a two-tiered RFP. And that's really all I got to say tonight. I hope you have questions or comments, not necessarily now, but if you'll stop by or email me or call me. But it is something we really need to do. I'll try to get you some kind of a starting point in the next few weeks. I apologize for not doing it already. I'm bad about overpromising, but next month or two I should be able to have you something that we can at least have a starting point and start beating it up. Any questions or comments tonight from anybody? Yay.
Mr. Harris, would that need to go through the planning commission first or start with the council first?
Preferably through the planning commission. So
would you need something from us to go
no,
ahead and get that started?
I just kind of want you to be thinking about it, because when we talked about this several months, maybe even a couple of years ago, maybe, I forget exactly what the time frame was, and there was a fairly pronounced thought through several of the council members that we could do it in-house. If you ever take my word for anything while I'm here, please, we can't do it in-house. We simply cannot do a decent job of a plan update with one planner and one admin person. It just won't happen. So I just mostly want to get you thinking in a more positive notion that we've got to contract this out. So, and I kind of want some idea that we're not going to go through planning commission with it and then just have it squashed and say, no, we're going to just try to limp through and do something in-house. If we do something in-house, it won't be good. It's just.
Mr. Harris?
Yes, ma'am.
With you, did I understand you right? This could run anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000?
I think so.
Is this a fund we already have, or does this
No.
come out of general fund?
We would.
Where would
Well,
we-
I'd have to ask finance director and you folks how you wanted to do that.
Is that a this year project?
Well.
Probably so. It's needed. I know it's needed.
Yeah, if I knew that we were going to do it next year, we'd get all the groundwork and get it all done and just boom, and do it at budget time and include it for next year. But we just, there's been a lot of talk about doing a lot of zoning code updates, but that's really the cart before the horse. If we start making major zoning changes when we haven't updated the plan in 15 years, we're really doing it backwards.
Right.
But as far as scheduling and how we pay for it, I throw myself on the mercy of my colleagues and you folks.
Mr. McCowan, he'll keep you straight.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Finance Committee, Chairman Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor. The Finance Committee had met last Tuesday in conjunction with the agenda meeting, and we had 3 items that we took action on that night. Consideration of resolution to authorize the mayor to apply for a 50/50 matching grant from the Arkansas Department of Parks and Tourism's Outdoor Recreation Grant Program for the Russellville Soccer Complex. I believe this is for funding for the lighting of the soccer fields at the soccer complex. This was passed by the Finance Committee and recommended to the council in form of a motion.
Council, you heard the motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor, next on the agenda are 2 appropriations, number 2 and number 3. I'll bring those together as one motion. Capital Department, painting at Hickey, $3,000. Street Department, aerial photos that we were partnering with City Corporation on $24,824. Those were passed by the committee and for recommendation to the full council in form of a motion.
Any discussion on that? Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor, also, we met tonight prior to this meeting. We have 10 items that we discussed. Item number 1, consideration of review and/or resolution to approve the AIE document for Van Horn Construction as construction management for the Aquatic Center project. I believe it's AIE document A133 and the supplemental conditions that Mr. Smith has provided. That was passed by the council, brought to the full, that was passed by the committee, brought to the full council in form of a motion.
Okay, any discussion on that?
Mayor, may I say something here?
Yes, sir.
We have a resolution, 1295, dated back 19th day of July 2012, where the city enters into an agreement with ETC to provide engineering, architectural, and overseeing the project of the Aquatic Center. That contract is, in dollar figures, is a little over a $500,000 contract. And it clearly says in here that no changes can be made to this contract without the written approval of both parties. And I'm assuming those both parties mean the city and ETC. Now, my question is, do we have written approval from ETC to do anything different than what this contract says?
Mayor, if I may reference something. Mr. Stuber, I believe in that same contract, it also states something to the effect of if the owner, which would be the city, wishes to employ a more accurate cost analysis, cost estimate of the project, they can employ a third party. And I believe that's what this is doing. That's also stated in that same contract.
It does say they can employ a third party to give a more accurate estimate of the cost of the project. But it doesn't say they can employ a third party as a construction manager to second guess what they have designed. And if you go to the contract you've got here with Van Horn Construction, unless that's been changed since the other day, that pretty well, if Van Horn desires, they can pretty well put the architect plumb out.
Mr. Smith, that's not how I read that contract. Would you care to give your opinion on that?
I would believe Mr. Stuber's incorrect on that.
I don't think Mr. Stuber is incorrect on that.
I believe you are, sir. That's my legal opinion on it, too.
Of course, we have a binding contract. Now, it does say we can terminate this contract anytime we want to, but ETC will get paid for what portion of the contract they have performed, what portion of the work they have done. It says that. Is that a binding contract, or is that just something wrote down on paper that should have been on soft paper where you use it for something? I'm waiting for an answer. I mean, I'm assuming someone's gonna,
I don't know who you're directing it to, if it's to Mr. Tripp, chairman, or somebody else.
well, we're talking about legal items here, and I assume the head legal person sitting at this table is a city attorney. Maybe I'm wrong.
So you're saying I'm the head legal personnel?
At the table.
Okay.
You got that title, let me put it that way.
Right. I believe you may be confusing some of the terminology, and so I believe that, yes, there is a termination clause, but I don't see how it has anything to do with a contract with a construction manager. So I believe that's maybe some confusion on your part.
But this whole contract, you read this whole contract.
Yes, I wrote it, yeah, I've read it.
I understand, but it's all geared toward ETC,
No, it's
doing the
not.
architectural work,
That's incorrect.
engineering,
That's incorrect.
designing the whole project,
That's incorrect.
and overseeing the project being built.
I understand, and that's incorrect on that part. They are working with ETC, but they have defined roles, in which of those roles they are supposed to interact, but it does not put the construction manager in charge of the architect engineer.
I'm talking about the ETC contract.
I understand what you're saying, but they have separate roles. And we have contracted with ETC for separate roles that they are supposed to work with the construction manager. And if you believe that somehow that's not correct, I believe that's just some confusion on your part, but there is nothing that will interfere with these two contracts or conflict.
Let me ask one more question, then I'll be quiet about this. I talked to you the other day, Mr. Smith, and I apologize for not being here at 5 o'clock today, but I looked at my fabulous iPad to get the time this thing started, and it said 5:30. So, I showed up at 5:30, and I do apologize for that. Had I looked at the paperwork like I should have done and normally do, I'd have been here. But anyway, done lost, kind of forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, I was asking you about cost of personnel and cost of equipment. Sooner or later, there's going to be an item thrown out there that a job superintendent is going to be billed for so many dollars an hour, an assistant job superintendent for so many, and construction managers for so much, a secretary for so much, and on down the line. There's going to be numerous personnel that's going to be billed on an hourly charge, and there's going to be numerous equipment that's going to be billed on an hourly charge. Of course, the contract you are presently working on with Van Horn does say that equipment will be billed at 100% of what you can rent it locally, of course. And have we got that in here now? I haven't looked at it.
No.
When is that forthcoming?
Well, 2 hours after you'd stopped the meeting, there was a meeting involving this, Mr. Wisely with Van Horn Construction, and I guess you could have talked to him then. I did pass along your concerns to him.
Mr. Smith, if I...
We're continually talking about trust. You got to trust us. You got to trust us. What's wrong with putting this out here on the table at this point in time? Why is the...
Well, I understand from Mr. Weiser, and I will not speak for him, was that he would provide it at a later date. Again, if it's concerning to you, there was a meeting 2 hours after you stopped by my office, and you could have asked yourself if it was that concerning to you. But I did pass along your word, of your concerns. But again, he was there not 2 hours later for him to be asked these questions by you.
Mr. Stuber, if you don't mind, let me possibly clarify your question with Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, you had discussed another document that would need to be executed or developed and executed for the construction phase. It was my understanding that the specific questions that Mr. Stuber is referring to at this time would be referenced in that document, which would be from start of construction forward.
Yes, That's the document we're referring to is AIA A 2001-2007. I've loaded the standard form contract on your Dropbox back on April 13th, about 3:15, for people that were curious about it to review, even though we haven't got to it there in this process. It's been made available to all of y'all.
So that is the document that would come after this one, towards the end of the design phase, going towards the construction phase.
I think, yeah, I think maybe the 20th time I've said this, yes.
Maybe I'm misinformed, but I was led to believe, or, you know, from what I read and what I heard, that during this negotiation phase with these construction managers, that all these items would be on the table, and that would determine whether you could reach agreement with one of them or not. And all these charges had something to do with it. Maybe charges don't matter here. The bottom line is that sometime, you know, we're gonna get a guaranteed maximum price, you know, after it's put out for bids, but we really don't know what portion of that guaranteed maximum price goes to the contractor, and what portion of it goes toward the project.
Mayor,
Is
if
that
I
to
may.
me or you?
Mr. Hull, are you here representing Van Horn Construction? Would you like to address anything, any questions, or specific to Mr. Stuber's questions pertaining to the specific equipment charges or labor charges, other things? Traditionally, because the construction management method is, as you know, new to us as a body. Traditionally, how is that, where and when is that part of it addressed?
Well, normally, right now, the only thing you folks are looking at right now is the pre-construction portion of it. Now, the good part of it from Mr. Stuber's comments, if by some chance, when we reach to the end of this pre-construction phase of this project, and before we bid it, if y'all decide that this is not what y'all want to do, then we walk away with just that fee that's associated with the pre-construction phase, and we're done. Then you can advertise and put it out for bid. So I think that's one thing y'all may be missing here. So if you're not and at that point, when we do submit that GMP, that'll come with a letter, that Exhibit A, and that will lay out all those fee charges that we're talking about.
I'm sorry,
Go right ahead.
but all these fees we're talking about are not something that can be put on the table now.
No, they'll have to be developed once the plans are completed. That's the time to do it, Mr. Stuber.
We have to hire you first to get these fees on the table?
All you're hiring for me first is the pre-construction phase. You're not hiring me for nothing else.
And then once you get to the bids, get the bids out, then everything is written down on that bid and what it costs us for each and every item,
That is correct.
correct?
It's my understanding,
So-
Mr. Hull, that what we have before us today is just trying to aid us, the owner, the customer, into getting a final set of drawings
That is correct.
to go to that next phase, that next part. And that is the A-133 with the supplemental cost,
That is correct.
part of it.
So, Mr. Hull, if we proceed down this path, we really have no way to decide legitimately whether we want to proceed down this path with you or the number two person or company or the number 3 person. We've got to go all the way through this bidding process before we're allowed to make that final decision as to whether, I guess I incorrectly assumed that this negotiating process would be a matter of a couple-week deal where all these things would get ironed out, and if they didn't get ironed out satisfactory to the city of Russellville, that we would move on and start trying to iron them out with number 2 if we stayed on that route. And if we didn't get them ironed out with them, we proceed to number 3. But from what you're saying, this construction manager process, if we if we continue, if we fail to go with you, after, you know, and we continue this process, hell, this could take a year and a half.
That's a decision y'all gotta make.
Well, Mr. Stuber, if I'm not mistaken, in the interviews, I think each one of them said the same thing about the contract. They couldn't give you a final bid on it until the project was 100% ready to go to bid, and then bid it, and then they brought the prices to it. Each one of them, all three companies told us the same thing. So we knew going in that one company wasn't over another one as far as that is concerned. Each one of them told us that they couldn't give us a final bid until all the bids were let out and came back and the drawings was 100%.
But I assumed, and no one said anything differently, I assumed all the charges on the part of the construction manager would be a negotiable item as far as determining which construction manager we wanted to employ. They never, they all indicated that it, or maybe I misinterpreted,
I
okay?
think you misunderstood, Mr. Stuber.
Anybody else?
I'll just make one comment. And I kind of understand where Mr. Suber's coming from on this, that I'm not sure exactly what we would be negotiating if we don't have the stuff we're going to be negotiating for in front of us. Is it the $18,000 or what? Is that what we're negotiating, or?
I don't know what we're negotiating, don't
Yeah.
ask me.
As I understand it, at this point, that's what we're committing to. 18,000 for, yeah.
I wondered if anybody would do it for free.
Of course, the bottom line, the answer to that question, if you put it out for hard bids, each contractor that bids on it will do it for free.
If I may, Mr. Nost signed up to speak. Is this the part you wanted to speak on?
Yes, sir.
Microphone, please, and identify yourself.
Yeah, don't blind nobody.
Bring my water like who's that presidential candidate that had to get his drink anyway.
Mr. Noce, you're not going to be here that long, are you?
Well, you never know. I get pretty dry throat.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right.
I guess my first question or statement would address Mr. Smith is this Resolution 1295, the contract with ETC, which is agreement with ETC engineers and architects to perform engineering and architectural services for the construction of the indoor aquatic facility.
Yeah, I've already heard it from Mr. Stuber.
Pardon me?
I've already heard this from Mr. Stuber. My answer is going to be the same to you, which is we contracted with them for architectural engineering services, not for a general contractor. So there's no conflict with that agreement and this agreement.
That isn't what I'm
Yes,
this
it is.
is in
Well, it
force. Is this contract in force now?
The
That's a
contract
yes or
is-
a no?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
And it
let me
has
go
no
on to-
conflict with the one proposed.
Let me go on to the rest of it. How many, let me see.
We're not discussing this contract here today.
I'm not,
Yes, you are. You're bringing up a contract that was approved unanimously by the council.
what are you asking?
You're going back and discussing a contract that was approved unanimously by this council 3 years ago.
Right. So can I ask my next question?
Go ahead.
Addressed to the whole council. How many of you have seen this contract?
It was put before
Can I see
them.
a show of hands?
It was put before them, and they voted unanimously for it.
The old council, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. But some of the people have not seen it. And the point is, some of the statements in here that says that you have to involve ETC with the process before you can go into any type.
And there's some of the things in this agreement before today that talks about the construction manager that has to involve ETC. Yes, they work together. It's not mutually exclusive.
Well, if you refer
I
back,
believe you're correct in whatever you're going to say.
you believe what?
I believe anything you're going to do that says this is a conflict with this agreement, the agreement you have before
I'm
is
not saying anything
incorrect.
about that agreement. I'm talking about this agreement.
Which one? The ETC one?
Yes.
We're not here tonight on the ETC one.
Well, you've got the court.
It's not on the agenda. Is it? Is it? Is it on the agenda or not?
Is on the
That's a yes or no one.
Are we in the finance committee part?
No, we're at the city
We're in the
council.
finance. Are we not discussing the finance committee,
Yeah.
Mr. Tripp?
And we're discussing the contract
Tripp?
before us.
Yes, I said yes.
He said yes. We're in the finance committee part.
And we're
that's what I
discussing
asked to address.
ACA 133207.
Mr. Mayor, may I interject something here?
Yes, Mr. Eads.
I think we're
Getting off.
getting into a hostile
I think so.
situation here at this point that I don't think deserves that. I know Mr. Nost has some questions. I do think that we ought to let him ask his questions.
Okay, and my-
And we can go from there with it, but I don't like the direction this is headed.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Is it okay if I move forward? Anyway, I ask a show of hands of the council members that had seen this contract. If you haven't seen it, I recommend that you get it, read through it, and on page 2 of the bottom paragraph, the proposal of the general provisions consists of 6 pages, Exhibit A hereto, which represent the entire understanding between you, which is the city, and us in respect to the project, and may only be modified in writing, signed by both of us. And so you'd have to ask your question, have to ask yourself, have we modified in writing in reference to the construction manager part of it? And then if you
I don't
go-
know how many
Now,
times I've got to discuss this with you. These are mutually exclusive.
I thought,
I've already said this. You're trying to bring a conflict that isn't there, no matter how many times you want to wish it.
What have we modified?
You're not. They're mutually exclusive. One is with the architect services, and one is a general contractor construction manager. They don't overlap in conflict.
You got another point? I think
Yes,
that's been
I
asked
don't
and
think
answered.
this
It's in the
point's going
record.
nowhere.
So,
go to the last contract language in here, and it says, neither the owner nor engineer architect shall assign, sublet, transfer any rights under the interest in this agreement without the written consent of the other, except as stated in paragraph 5.51. So you're wanting to make you want to alter the contract on the aquatic center. And until you get ETCs written, until you all agree with ETC that they'll allow you to do the construction manager, you got the cart before the horse.
That
And
is
I'd say-
totally incorrect.
That's fine.
okay, I think we've got it on record, and we know Mr. Smith's position, so. Does anybody else have any comment on this item? Mr. Chairman, that was in the form of a motion.
Yes, Mayor.
I think everybody understands the motion.
No? Would that be repeated, please?
Mayor, the motion from the Finance Committee was to approve the AIE document A-133, supplemental conditions with the, to move forward with hiring Van Horn Construction for construction management services, which would be A-133 is pre-construction services for the aquatic center.
Okay, if there's no other questions, you heard and understand the motion. All in favor? Say aye. Any opposed?
No.
Need to call the roll. The motion was from the Finance Committee.
Mr. Richard Harris?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. Mr. Harris? Aye. Yes. Aye.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Ms. Freddie Harris?
Yes. Mr. Stuber,
No.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
No.
Mr. Wiley,
Yes.
Mr. Eaton.
No.
Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, do you have other items for us?
Yes, Mayor, and in conjunction with that, I believe that the contract calls for gives the council the leeway to assign a representative, like for the construction meetings, the meetings between the owner, which is the city, the architect, and the construction manager. And if we are going to do so, I would like to nominate Mr. Richard Harris for this role, and I would make that in the form of a motion.
I didn't hear the motion. I was doing that or something.
Just restate it, Mr. Tripp.
According to the contract, I would like to appoint Mr. Richard Harris to serve as the council's representative to the meetings between, in conjunction with the mayor and whomever else he deems necessary, between the owner, which is us, the architect, and construction management.
Okay, just for procedure, is that motion from the finance committee, or are you making that motion?
According to Mr. Smith, that can be added on from me because of
Right.
what's pertaining to that, yes.
Do we need a second doing it that
Can-
way?
Yeah, go ahead and take a
Mayor, can I amend his
let's see.
motion and add a name to his motion? Can we have two?
It's a question for Mr.
Since
Smith.
Mr. Eaton's been in on this from the
We need to
get-go,
get a second on Mr. Tripp's motion first, right? And then he can
Okay.
do a supplemental, is that
He
how
can
that works?
amend it, and if Mr. Tripp doesn't like it, he can withdraw it, and then we can
Start
do a
all
circle.
over.
Yep. So,
Go ahead.
I'd like to add Mr. Eaton to this also. That way we would have two in on this, and Mr. Eaton's been in on this from the get-go.
Mr. Wiley, as long as Mr. Smith's okay with that, that is fine with me.
it's fine.
Okay, so now we have a motion and a second.
Mayor, this clearly isn't on the agenda. You know,
Well,
we're talking about consideration of review and/or a resolution to approve the AIA document.
We did that.
We did that, okay? That's what's on the agenda. We wanted to talk about the resolution with ETC. The attorneys tried to say that's not on the agenda. You can't talk about it. Well, this isn't on the agenda either.
it's a portion of the AIA 133
Well,
contract.
This,
We need,
this deal with ETC, this contract, that's a portion of it too. We need to,
Okay, Mr. Stuber, we've already approved the other one, so we've got to have someone to oversee this from the council. And that's all we're trying to do. Are you okay with my motion, Mayor? Mr. Eaton, are you okay with it?
I'll think about it.
Question? Question?
Mr. Brown?
Where is Mr. Hollis at in all this?
Mayor, if I may, are we still waiting on a second, or where are we on this procedurally?
If you're okay with Mr. Wiley's suggestion for your second, then we have a motion and a second.
Okay. Just
that
wanted to
correct?
clarify.
Correct.
Sorry, Mr. Brown, I
Correct.
just
Yeah.
want to make sure we
So we've got a motion and a second, now we can have discussion. Did you want to ask Mr. Hollis?
No, I just wanted to bring him up, make sure he's part of this whole process.
No, he is automatic. Oh, you're not? I thought you was in it on it automatically, because you was parking rec.
Would you come to the microphone, Mr. Hollis?
This is y'all's party.
mean, I don't find out about meetings unless the mayor calls me. I've had no councilman come in my office to discuss any of this, and I'm okay with that. I'm answering your question honestly.
Well, I'm not. I'm done.
Would you like to add any other names to your list of people that should be included in discussions on this?
Just as far as from the council standpoint, and I think the contract allows you to appoint anyone you so choose, you know, in addition to yourself. It gives you that leeway to do. This is just, allows the council to put a representative in it, but I believe the contract allows you full leeway to add someone to that list.
Very well then. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Abstain.
Mr. Tripp,
Yes.
Ms. Pretty Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Stuber,
No.
Mr. Eaton,
Abstain.
Mr. Richard Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Wiley,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
No.
Mr. Roberts.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mayor. Moving on down our list, item number 2 for tonight's Finance and Property Committee agenda was consideration of an ordinance amending ordinance 1825, which established a fund called the Capital Assets Fund to transfer the interest earned from the Capital Asset Fund to the General Fund. Mr. McCoyne had stated that it's referring only to the Capital Assets Fund, and the interest generates approximately $2,800 a month. This would allow him to transfer that interest to the general fund out of those capital assets fund. Doesn't require it to be done, it allows him to do so. And that was approved by the committee and brought before the council in form of a motion.
Okay. I got to lean on Mr. Smith again. Procedurally, when a committee recommends it, if they want to suspend the rules, can that be done at this point? Or can Mr. Tripp just state it in his motion that way? Or should we do a second vote on that?
He's saying it's approved, but any ordinance must be read in its entirety. So he's just giving the recommendation, but I will read it in its entirety unless he or anybody wants to suspend the rules.
What's the council believe about that? Do you want to read this whole thing, or do you want to suspend the rules and?
I'm fine with.
Make the motion, suspend the rules.
Make the
Read
motion,
with
suspend the
title
rules,
only,
and read
short
the title only
explanation.
one time.
Okay. Motion for Mr. Wiley to suspend the rules and read one time by title only. Mr. Tripp seconded. All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. Are we correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
An ordinance amending ordinance number 1825, which established a fund called the Capital Asset Fund to transfer the interest earned from the Capital Asset Fund to the General Fund for other purposes. This ordinance, if passed, would amend ordinance number 1825 to add an additional section that would allow the interest accrued from the Capital Assets Fund to the General Fund to be handled by the Finance Department.
I can make this motion. You can make your motion.
No.
Then we need to make one to adopt it, is that right? I'd make a motion to adopt that.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Tripp, second, Mr. Wiley. I think everybody heard that and understands where we're at. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Call the roll.
Mr. Tripp,
Yes.
Mr. Wiley,
Yes.
Mr. Eaton,
Yes.
Mr. Richard Harris,
Yes.
Ms. Freddie Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Stuber,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Mr. McCoy, would you like for us to vote on the emergency clause or, okay. unless anybody else wants to, we're fine without it. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mayor. Next on the agenda was consideration of resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to sign a sewer line easement to city corporation. As explained by Mr. Jones, this is a piece of property behind the current public works facility where there is, where city corp does have some infrastructure there, that there is clearly no right-of-way given for that, and this would identify that. And that was recommended by the committee and brought to the council in the form of a motion.
Council, you heard the motion. Do we have any questions on that or comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Next on the agenda, number 4, consideration of resolution to authorize the mayor and city clerk to enter into an agreement for services with the Arkansas Valley Alliance for Economic Development. Again, it was tabled, but it was discussed about potentially getting into the resolution, the details of the contract in the near future, whether it be preset meetings or additional meetings. But that in your packet, there is stuff presented to you. Please review it because it will be up for discussion in the near future. Item number 5, consideration of resolution to apply, accept, and award a grant with CenterPoint Energy for a community partnership grant for safety equipment. This has to do with some infrared cameras for the fire department. This is a 50-50 grant, and our portion would come out of the fire department. They're small tools, and this was approved by the committee and brought before the council in form of a motion.
Council, you heard the motion. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next, number 6 and number 7 are 2 appropriations, one for $1,744.37, and the other one for $19,031. You can see before you there the vehicle for Parks and Rec and to repair a police department vehicle. Those were passed by the committee and brought before the council in form of a motion.
Council, you heard the motion. Do we have any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Number 8, consideration of an ordinance waiving competitive bidding for city banking accounts with, and continue with current banking service provider. This was discussed, presented by Mr. McCoyne, and voted by the committee to recommend to the council for approval. And if I need to change that or amend that in form, or make a separate one for reading one time only, suspend the rules, then so be it.
Second.
Okay, you've heard the motion and the second to suspend the rules and read one time by title only. If there are no discussion or questions on that motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And now the main motion, excuse me, Mr. Smith.
An ordinance waiving competitive bidding authorizes the city of Russellville to execute agreement with Centennial Bank for financial purposes for the city. For their purposes, this ordinance would waive the bidding requirement for a service such as this that is over $20,000, so that the city can go ahead and continue its agreement with Centennial Bank for the financial services it currently provides.
Mayor, make a motion to adopt.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Tripp, second, Mr. Wiley. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Tripp,
Yes.
Mr. Wiley,
Yes.
Mr. Eaton,
Yes.
Mr. Richard Harris,
Yes.
Ms. Freddie Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Stuber,
No.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Brown, I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't get this. Motion carries.
Item number 9, consideration of resolution expressing the willingness of the city of Russellville to utilize state aid, street monies for the following projects, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk treasurer to sign the necessary documents with the Arkansas State Highway and Transportation Department for the project. This was passed by the committee, recommended to the council in form of a motion.
Council, you heard the motion. Any discussion?
What exactly is this, willingness of the city to do here?
Mr. Stuber, that was presented by Mr. Jones, and basically, late last year, we applied for a grant program through the Highway Department, and we gave them a list of streets that was on our overlay program, and their estimates, or the preliminary estimates for milling and paving is around $250,000. It's a 90-10 program, so we would have to pay 10% of whatever the actual contract bid is, but it's projected around $250,000, so our expense would be $25,000 to overlay several
Okay.
streets.
And Kurt has that money. Mr. Jones, you said you'd pull it out of your overlay. Good. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Item number 10 is last on our list, consideration and resolution to accept the low bid from Western Millwright in the amount of $45,900.10 for the University Avenue sidewalk project. That was again passed by the committee and brought before the council in form of a motion.
Council, you heard the motion. Any discussion?
Aye.
All in fa-
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Getting ahead of us there,
You
Bill.
go back to the back of the pack, and then we'll start this race. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor, that concludes.
Did you not have an item 11?
No, we didn't take action on it. It was just.
Well, it is 11, I don't have 11.
Okay. Yep. Council, if everybody agrees, we'd like to take about a 5-minute recess. Some of us have been in these chairs since 5 o'clock, and at our age, that's a long time.
Thank you, man.
If everybody is okay with that, we'll get started again at 7:15. Personnel. Chairman Stuber, do you have anything?
Mr. Mayor, I have nothing to report.
Hearing that, we'll move into unfinished old business, consideration of a resolution requiring the rehab of by agreement for removal or raising of an unoccupied structure.
Make a motion we adopt.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. I trust everybody remembers this from last month. If you got any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? New business item 1, consideration of a public hearing and an ordinance to vacate a right-of-way.
Make a motion we suspend the rules, read by title only with short explanation.
Oh,
Mr.
Yep.
Mayor, okay.
have to do a public hearing.
It's ordinance.
Yeah, well, it's a public hearing first.
Oh, okay,
So,
sorry, Mayor.
We'll open the public hearing at this time. Is anybody here to comment on this? For or against? For?
2,400. 2,400, yeah, this will be it.
Yeah,
It'll be this one.
2400 block.
Yes,
You want to speak?
he's for it.
Does anybody else wish to speak?
No, you can, I don't see where any close, nobody's running up to the mic.
Mayor, this was approved by the planning commission, is that correct?
Okay,
Yes, it was.
yes, it was. All right, nobody else wants to speak on it, we'll declare the public hearing closed. And
Now I'll
now-
make my motion, Mayor.
Restate that, please, Mr. Wiley.
Make a motion we suspend the rules, read by title only with short explanation.
And then, Mr. Eaton, did you second that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so
Thank
we have a
you.
motion and a second. Any other discussion? First, we have to suspend the rules. All in favor of suspending the rules?
Aye.
Any opposed? So now,
An ordinance vacating main parts of right-of-way in the 2400 block of East Main Street, in the city of Russellville, Arkansas. For the purposes this ordinance, if passed, would vacate the right-of-way in the 2400 block of East Main Street, which is more particularly described as Exhibit A, attached with the ordinance.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Wiley?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. Richard Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Ms. Freddie Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Stuber?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Motion carries.
The petitioner has asked for you to consider the emergency clause. I would entertain a motion.
I
Motion.
move that we consider that at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Motion, Mr. Eaton, second, Mr. Wiley, to adopt the emergency clause. Any discussion? All in favor of adopting the emergency clause?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I need to call the roll. Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. Wiley?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Ms. Freddie Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Stuber?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Richard Harris?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 2, consideration of a resolution to issue a special use permit to allow a billboard sign for property located at intersection of I-40 and Aspen Lane.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. This was also recommended unanimously by the Planning Commission. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Number 3, consideration of a resolution to issue a special use permit to allow a machine shop for property located at 508 North El Paso.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mayor, is this petitioner, is this the actual landowner?
I believe that's correct. Mr. Holloway is actually here. Mr. Holloway, would you step to the microphone?
What was the question?
Are you the actual property owner there?
I am.
The things coming in and out will not be by a large truck or anything like that?
UPS is the largest truck.
Only standard, you know?
That's right.
carrier
No
type.
tractor trailer rigs.
Is there potential for you to expand at some time in the future so that you would require larger equipment, materials brought in? And the reason I ask is, as you know, this is a corridor that we just got through spending a lot of money to make look nice. And the last thing that I would want is now we've got, large trucks and heavy machinery and stuff brought right into that corridor. And that's a real concern of mine.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Well, I think the city alone can't allow me to expand any to the building. It's as big as it can get. I believe it's in the floodway. It can't be added onto. The building itself, if you were to come by and see, limits the size of equipment that can be put in it. The doorways are not large. The ceiling's not tall. Pretty much what's in there is what can be in there. The size of the building, itself is going to not allow it to expand. And I think a lot of people misunderstand when we're talking machine shop, they think huge bedware type stuff. I build prototypes. I build small stuff. I design it. I build it. I take it to the manufacturer. They test it. If it works, they might have me build a production of it. They might send it to the cheapest guy. It's not a machine shop where I'm open to the public. I have a relationship with a lot of industry that I've worked for the past 30 years, and I do design work for them, and I build prototypes for them. For me to be open to the public, for anybody to walk in and say, I need this tractor part fixed or whatever, I understand they may need it fixed, but it's not something that I can afford to stop what I'm doing and fix. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm not, as far as the expansion goes, I think if you were to come by and look, you would see that it's pretty limited to what can be put in there.
You can't add.
Thank you. Council, any other questions? Do we have a motion yet on it?
Yes.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 4, consideration of a resolution adopting the Polk County Hazard Mitigation Plan for the city of Russellville. This is the deal that was brought to us last month by 911. It's a renewal of a plan that we have to update annually.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Wiley and a second by Mr. Eaton. Any questions or discussion?
That's just something you do every year, isn't it?
It is, and
Just paperwork.
yeah, and it's kind of, you have to have it if
Yeah.
it can, if you don't have one, the schools can't get grants for storm shelters.
Yeah.
Other things like that.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5, discussion of premium protein product standard operating procedures. Everybody should be in receipt of that SOP that they sent out. Do we have any discussion on that, or want to make any notes, or?
I
what's
only
the
got
council's
one
think?
question. What is going to happen with the smell?
2.
I know, Mr. Mayor, if I may make a couple of comments, I know I'm going to appear to be uncaring or harsh or whatever with my comments. Now, I know this identifies a number of SOPs. I don't know if these SOPs are in place and in operation at this time, but I do know that this past week there was an extremely foul odor coming from the plant. So I question how, if they are in place, how valid they are. I'm just not sure that we're going to get anywhere by putting SOPs in place if they're not followed. And, I think it's time for us to press on with this situation that we have in our city that I believe is extremely detrimental to the continued development of our city. And I realize it has an impact on the lives of several people, but I'm not convinced that anything in the way of what's in here is going to be what we're expecting this to be.
I'll have to agree with you, Mr. Eaton.
Mayor, if I may, I agree with Mr. Eaton 110%. And what do we need to do to take the next step? What do we need to do to safeguard the residents, to the people that to call me, send me messages over the weekend that live nearby that have to endure that? What do we do? We've been on this for over a year now.
Yes.
And I'm not seeing much progress. If I'm not mistaken, I think there's been some emergency service calls to that facility of the not too distant past, in the past few months. I think it becomes a concern to this body and to the residents of this community that they need to get their act together or they need to do something different.
And we've said that last year. They needed to get their act together, do something different. So I am ready to act. I don't know what the next step is, but
Mr. Smith, Mr. Mayor, if I may address him at this point in time, you and I, when I was in office, talked about this at pretty good length about what next step that we probably should take, and I'm of the opinion that we need to either as a whole council or something decide how we go about remedying this situation that is more than documents sent to us that appear to be nothing more than just paper with no real meat to action.
Is this what I said?
Mr. Smith?
There's about two, maybe three, just depending on your preference. One, of course, passing ordinance. I've looked at some from other cities and other states, so it's something that I've seen have been done. And look at if they're violating that ordinance to bring an action on that. Secondly is maybe look at the filing a civil suit based on a public or private nuisance based on the smell. That would be something, though, that it would help if we had neighbors that would join either with us in filing suit or participate as witnesses. Again, we would have to prepare for a lawsuit. We would look at maybe have to hire experts in this type of field that could testify as to what PPP could do or should be doing to contain the smell. Another option is possibly setting up a committee to try and work with PPP to continue to monitor the situation specifically and work with them to see if these standard operating procedures are being addressed and enforced there. Of course, that will take their cooperation, but that's the three options I've seen legally that you can do.
Mayor, I think I had sent this out to everyone a few weeks or a month ago. I had a lady that brought by a newspaper article from like 1977, 1978. And I still have it if anybody wants a copy of it, that explains a lawsuit that was filed about this same exact issue in the 1970s. You know, and here we are again. Mr. Smith, can you present us some options at the next meeting and let us choose to go, or do we need to make a committee and do it? You know, I'm ready. Let's go. Yes, there's 28 jobs, and we're not or 30 jobs. We're not looking to do away with those jobs. We want them to be a community partner in their facility. That's all we're asking. And I don't believe that they've been a community partner.
Well, let me just say this: the Pilgrim's Premium Proteins did what they told the council they were going to do. They said they were going to develop some standard operating procedures to improve the processes at their facility, and they've done that. So the cities acknowledge that they did what they said they were going to do. However, I think the consensus of the council is that we don't feel like that's enough. Now that we've seen this, we don't feel like it's enough. That we don't feel like this is going to correct the problem, and based on some discussions I had earlier today, there's still an odor emanating from the facility. So if they've incorporated this, it hasn't done the job.
Exactly.
So the council needs, you know, my mother used to have a little chihuahua that I was never scared of, but it sure did annoy me with all its yapping every time I'd go to her house. I soon learned, after a while, I learned to ignore it. And council needs to quit yapping like that chihuahua and take action or shut up and go home. That's all I got to say.
Very well put. Mayor, let's don't go home.
I think it was noted in that packet, those SOPs were, they were kind of arrived at by an engineering company, I think in Little Rock. The council, if you'll give me direction, we'll do whichever one you want. I'm wondering if we should have an action in mind, put that on next month's agenda and notify them and see if these people will come up. It would be interesting to know if they're saying that all of these SOPs are currently in place.
It still stinks.
Yeah. You know, it might be good to have them tell us, is this the best we can expect if we let them keep operating, or is there more they're gonna do, or?
Option one was an ordinance, is that what you said, Trent?
Yes. I mean, you're looking at an ordinance, you're looking at, you're gonna though look at, if you wanna make it objective, you're looking at having to get some type of odor meter that you can take out there and make measurements. And so you're looking at, it's not just an ordinance, you're looking at equipment cost, you're gonna look at who's gonna enforce it. Is it gonna be code enforcement, is it gonna be somebody else? But yes, that is one way I've seen other communities try and address the situation. The other is just filing a suit based on the common law or common tort of nuisance and just making your case with people in the area that have complained. And so you've got that as the second issue. And then you're looking at, on that case, you're going to be hiring experts. So it's something that you're going to get into cost situation. It's something you should be cognizant of if you want to go that route.
The ordinance route, is that the deal you found? Is it Grand Island,
That was one of the more, and they had a stockyard, was their issue, but yes, that was one of the towns I found.
And they solved it with a task force, is that right? Or?
They went the task force route in the end, and they worked with the corporation, and they had proposed one. I don't know if they ever actually passed it, but between the threat of passing the ordinance and having a task force, they got their issue resolved.
Mr. Smith, if we did something like the ordinance or whatever, and you're talking about putting some kind of a metering or monitoring system there, is there means to, in that ordinance, indicate if the results of the monitoring showed that it was out of compliance, that we could levy some fine or whatever in that regard?
Yes, typically they address it so that they have the meter, you stand at the property line of the offending industry, you take readings, and they have a baseline if it reaches over a certain amount. Usually it's something per quantity of volume, and if it reaches over that amount, then they're in violation, and then they will be fined accordingly to the ordinance.
What's your thought?
Good with whatever we move, something moving forward.
All right, so you want us to come up with a recommended course of action and bring it in next month? We'll notify them and let them come in and see if they, see what their response is?
I think that's a good idea.
Is that okay with everybody?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Item 6, consideration of a resolution requiring rehabilitation by agreement for removal or raising of an unoccupied dilapidated structure, 408 South Arkansas.
I'll make that motion.
Second. Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Mr. Clark, you've sat there all night. I'm going to ask you to come up and give us some details on this.
I'm Bill Clark, Code Enforcement Officer for the city. This property belongs to Mr. Chuck Frankhouse. He came by my office Tuesday, indicated that he was not going to be able to be here. His brother had died in California suddenly, and him and his wife and mother flew out there to attend that funeral. He did indicate to me that the insurance has not been settled with on this property, so he has asked for tabling it for 30 days until he can get back and get the insurance thing settled.
I understand this is a safety concern based on the condition of the structure. Am I incorrect on that?
The back of the structure does appear to be hazardous, but it is boarded up, and since Mr. Frankhouse has gotten everything out of the front part of the structure, I have not seen anybody going back in.
Didn't Mr. Holstein say that it was going to cost a whole lot more than what he thought that he was going to be willing to spend?
That I have not heard.
He did mention that, I believe the deal is they estimate that this would be a over 50% remodel, which means everything has to be brought up to the new code.
That would be correct.
And what will affect this structure, because of the way it's used, that means they're going to have to put in a sprinkler system, Chief, is that? Correct. Which is really going to make it expensive.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be really expensive. And I've seen pictures of this building, and it is in bad shape.
You can see it when you drive by it.
Well-
Mayor, or Mr. Smith, did
there's other adverse action pertaining to this location, correct?
I believe so, yes.
So, until that's resolved, he's not gonna be able to rehab it to begin with, correct?
Correct.
Did we ever check and see when that date of action was going to take place?
I apologize, Mr. Tripp.
I
I had
you know,
myself
we
a
can
note
give him-
to do it.
Oh, it's fine. We can give him 30 days, but I'm not sure that, I'm not sure that that's gonna get us anywhere. Because I think that other issue has to be resolved with pending action on it before this piece of property can be remodeled, or would be remodeled, or rebuilt.
Well, let's bring it back next month.
Well, since we don't have his insurance situation resolved, I mean, I don't know, can we take action anyway, Mr. Smith?
I think you can if you want. It's
Yeah.
just whether you want to see if he'll go the rehab agreement or not. Or wait for him to have those means to see if he will. So,
Well, it is up to Mr. Holstein and Mr. Clark to make that determination of the amount of remodeled requirement, isn't it?
well, I guess their determination of requirements he's got to meet, so I guess indirectly, yes.
What about the
Did they give you some kind of indication of how long they would be in California?
They did not. I wouldn't think more than a week, 3 or 4
It-
days. I mean,
And
they were
that
going
was,
to attend the funeral.
and they knew that Tuesday, so,
Yes.
so they got a 2-day head start on it.
Yeah.
If the council acts on this, they've got how many days to come in and sign the rehab agreement or not?
Till next Thursday.
So,
Till, when you
And
sign that ordinance, they give 7 days.
and if he signs his rehab agreement, he's got 180 days
That's correct.
to either rehab it or we move on.
Well, if he has until next Thursday to sign this, a week from today, then I move that we go ahead with this process.
Was there a tax issue on that too?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
We think there is. I
Don't know.
really should have checked and checked the date that would come up.
No, it's not here.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Stuber?
I personally feel like, putting that off 30 days to let him get his insurance taken care of is a valid request. I mean, and because, you know, what he gets on his insurance may be the determining factor of whether he wants to sign a rehab agreement or not.
Yeah, he may not want one.
I mean, you know. So, you know, I for one think 30 days is a legitimate request to put that off.
I'll just say that I don't feel comfortable, personally moving, taking action, when the gentleman's got a death in the family and he's out of state.
I
don't-
withdraw
there's
my
no s-
motion.
Can we table it to our next council meeting?
Yes.
Is that your motion?
To our next council meeting,
Our next
Second,
regular
table.
next council. meeting.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to table it until the May meeting,
No, my motion is to table it until the next council meeting,
the next council meeting.
whenever that is.
Okay.
I don't know if you can make the motion on an indefinite.
Okay, all right, I apologize.
Unless the fallback is the regular May
Yes,
council meeting.
the next council meeting, no later than the May meeting. That was my intention.
Then that could
Okay.
work, yeah.
Everybody understand the motion? Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I don't have anybody listed to speak for the public comment period, so,
Motion to adjourn.
thank you.